On this episode of the Following Films podcast, I had the chance to sit down with the incredibly talented production designers behind Beast Games, Stephen Leonhardt and Isabella Scannone. If you've seen the show, you know it's unlike anything else on TV right now. A massive, high-stakes competition with 1,000 contestants, mind-blowing challenges, and a $5 million prize. But what really sets it apart is the scale and imagination behind every set piece, and that's where Stephen and Isabella come in. In our conversation, we talked about how they approach designing something this ambitious, how they balanced creativity with the logistics of real-world competition, and what it took to build the unforgettable world of Beast Games. It's a fascinating look into the process of creating one of the most visually dynamic reality shows ever made. Beast Games is streaming worldwide on Prime Video. I hope you enjoy the show. Thanks. First thing I was wondering, is the job of being a production designer on something like Beast Games as difficult as it would seem from the outside? Because it seems like the scale of this thing is, for lack of a better word, absurd. I guess, Stephen, you're to the left, so just start with
The short
you.
answer is yes.
Okay, all right. And could you go into a little bit more detail as to what the challenges were in producing something, just being in charge of production design for something of this scale?
Yeah, I would say the very first challenge was just getting over the shock of what they were proposing, and because it had never been done before, not Beast Games had never been done before, but nothing of this scale had ever been done before. You get a lot of like interviews with producers in this world where they say, we have this concept and it's going to be the biggest thing ever. And by the time you get to production, it's nothing like that at all, which is fine. That's part of it, right? You sell
Yeah.
shows by saying it's going to be the biggest thing ever. And these guys came to us and said, we've got this idea and it's going to be the biggest thing ever. And we said, well, that's going to be expensive. That's going to be more than anybody's ever spent on a show. And they said, yeah. And we said, you want to do it in 2.5 months? That's not enough time. And they said, but we're gonna.
So, Isabella, what is your intestinal fortitude like as far as taking on a challenge like this? As far as how this is, the things I've been involved with were very, very small and they were very stressful. So, being involved on something of scale, I can't even imagine.
I think we were well prepped. We've worked on a lot of smaller shows that were
Mhm.
also stressful. So I think this was kind of like a scaled up version. Definitely what was very difficult about it was the timeline. And I think one of the hardest things about a tough timeline is that the time to design and budget really gets compressed. And that makes our job very difficult because at the end of the day, you still need time to come up with ideas and then figure out how much they cost and then rework them. So I think the most stressful part was actually having to do all that in such a abridged amount of time of just, having to almost multiple times a day be coming up with a brand new idea and be having a conversation about how to make it cost less or how to make it fit what is needed. So that was actually the most difficult part.
And was there a particular game or, I guess, sequence or however you want to refer to it that seemed like the biggest challenge from the onset?
I think there were several that were really challenging for different reasons. Some of them were incredibly technically complicated and took an entire team of just prototyping, doing tests, trying different vendors to see, who could do it and who could get all the different parts and who could do it in time. So specifically the platform kind of game just took a lot of brain power from many different people to figure out not only how to do it, because it's not an incredibly difficult thing to do just as a one-off, but then how do we scale it up? How do we get it made and then shipped to our location? And then how does it get partially fabricated in our location? Then there were things like the city and the tower set, which were challenging just because of their sheer scale and the fact that they were going to be supporting like hundreds of people in the city. There were going to be hundreds of people actually housed there. And And then there were some that were just a logistical challenge. Like we shot in Toronto where they do shoot a lot of productions, but not quite of this scale. And so we ran into not having all of the labor and all of the resources that we would normally have in a place like LA, for example.
Sure.
So it's figuring out how to get some of the pieces made in other places and brought there, how to engage like all of these different types of vendors locally and figure out what their different skills were so that we could fill in the holes of what we didn't have as easily available there as we would normally have. So I think a lot of different ones presented very different challenges.
But no, that makes perfect sense. And I would be, my 9-year-old would not forgive me if I didn't ask, because you brought up the platform, where the contestants go, how that works. When they drop through that, he was just obsessed with that. And when he would see these people disappear, he was wondering how far the drop was and what they landed on.
We shot on a military airplane hangar,
Okay.
a fabrication hangar in Toronto, primarily chosen because this was integral to Jimmy's vision of how this all was supposed to look, but to get a building that was big enough to house it without any vertical columns, so that you could see entirely across the room. It was 750 feet by 200 feet. We took that entirety of that and built it 11 feet in the air on a scaffold.
Okay.
And so then on top of this 11-foot scaffold, there were 1,000 boxes with 1,000 trapdoors. And below each of the trapdoors were 1,000 4-foot by 4-foot by 10-foot tall plywood boxes that were filled with foam. So basically, they would disappear far enough. They fell far enough, basically, that they fell down below where they could stand up and hit their head on the doors.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all black, and they didn't know how far they were going to fall. They'd walked up the steps, so they had an idea, but it's still enough to, to really get the adrenaline going for real on them.
That would be absolutely frightening, and I would love to do that. That just sounds.
The underworld from it was amazing. Like literally, seeing these 1,000 plywood boxes with and dozens of safety people who had to be under
Of
there to
course.
pull each person out as they fell, and just these hallways that were 800 feet long, all the way down
That
each
so
row.
just Isabella, he brings up something interesting that I just want to touch on. The idea that there's 1,000 contestants at one point when this thing starts. How many people are there on the crew to support them? Because you think of each person that's dropping, and you have to have all this support crew for the scale of that is just the manpower behind this is just insane.
We would not know the exact number, but definitely the call sheets were the longest we've ever seen, like hundreds of people. Um, Definitely like a huge contestant, like support staff,
Yeah.
um, and a huge like challenge team, a huge props team, just to make sure that all the things that they're interacting with are ready to go. A huge wardrobe team to, dress them. And also there were, unlike in some other reality shows, like many more costumes involved, like several people on set wearing costumes, like producers in costume, like so definitely a really huge amount of power to kind of support that amount of contestants. And then all the thought that went into their living quarters, like sometimes when they weren't staying in the city for a few nights, there's a huge amount of, planning that goes into like where they go, how they get transported. So definitely a lot of time and energy that went into taking care of them.
Just to add a couple of numbers to color what Isabella was saying, we don't know all of the numbers. I don't know if any individual knows all of them, but the call sheets at one point had more than 800 people on them.
Mhm.
And we do know for certain that during the height of building the city and the pillars and the cubes all at the same time, that more than 1,000 people were working just on our construction, basically on our team.
Wow. That the logistics to organize and plan and execute all of that, coming from a theater background and doing a load in and trying to to get Aida because we had one elephant coming on stage. That was just a nightmare. And I never wanted to go back to that again because that was just so stressful and so hard. And doing something like this, the scale of it is so impressive. And it's just things like this where if you take a step back and actually look at what it takes, if you're thinking about it beyond just watching a show, and what did it take to make this? This isn't something that existed that you just said, oh, we're just going to go to, that giant game show town where they have quarters for several hundred people and these platforms that we can use. It's something that all has to be built from scratch, all these things that you're doing. It's like a Lawrence of Arabia scale of production in some way for, that it's the time that we're in. It's for a game show. And that makes sense because that's, the type of thing that can, I guess, demand this kind of scale. And how do you think about this in terms of the show and what's being produced and what is the work that's going into it as far as the number of people? And you're thinking about the end result is this thing. We got to make sure this thing is entertaining and this thing is fun and that people are engaged with it. So are you considering that element of it as far as the end product, or is it more of a just logistical piece by piece? This is directive. This is kind of the, how I'm going to get through the day.
Definitely
Okay.
the Beast team they have great ideas. They're very committed to everything being driven by the game, the story, like the contested
Yeah.
reaction. So definitely that's where all the conversations start. Like they say, like, there's this great moment, and usually the games are very smart and very simple. It's not like a multi-part, like super convoluted game like
hmm
see in some other shows. It's a very simple idea with usually like a very impactful moment, sometimes revealed at the beginning, sometimes revealed at the end, and they want everything to be in service of that. So definitely we start with that first and then kind of build around that and sometimes make huge adjustments at the last minute or several times throughout the process to kind of continue to support that. Or, sometimes they throw an entire idea out because they've come up with like a better, more impactful idea. So we're definitely always sort of following what that idea for the game is.
And I think that comes across in the show because I watched this with my 9-year-old, and there's very few things that I will watch with him, and it's anything more than just trying to spend time with him and get to bond with him a little bit. And when we were watching this, though, I only put this on because it was something that he wanted to watch. He loves Mr. Beast, loves those videos. I could care less about them. I'm 48 years old. It's just not meant for me, and that's totally fine. But I was sucked into this thing. I genuinely enjoyed this. I had a good time with this, and it's not something that I normally would care about, but I had a great time watching the series. And I think that it is, to what you were saying, the human element, which was clearly at the forefront here. All the other stuff kind of goes away when you're thinking about this and talking about it later. You are talking about those human interactions, not the complexity of the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and they have a
Yeah.
lot of experience. They know exactly like how the contestants are going to react. They know how to put them in a situation where it's going to make for a great game. So it's nice to kind of have that experience of that team of saying like, we know if we do this, we'll have a great game.
That makes sense. And Steven, I'm just wondering, is there one element in the show, something that you worked on that you can hang your hat on and say, this is the thing I'm most proud of that we were able to do?
I think from a design standpoint, I'd have to say it's the entirety of the city because I just don't feel like anybody's been handed that sort of a design problem before, where it's just not like any other set. We had to we do reality shows all the time. Reality
Yeah.
shows have 30 contestants. That that usually your house is a mansion or something like that. We've also done big events where you have to deal with a lot more people, but like, we did BlizzCon and they have 20,000
hmm
guests. That is its own sort of thing, but this was a combination of those two worlds that is pretty unique and we felt like we had a lot to offer to the process to say like this isn't just a house. This is also an event. This is also a logistical issue for feeding people, for moving people. This is also a structure that you're going to do stunts on that has huge engineering challenges. Like it's got wind shear issues. We're outside. We're at the northern tip of an airport, and it's the windiest spot in Toronto. And we're going to put people 115
God.
feet in the air on top of it. Um, all of those things combined together to make something that I think was hard to achieve and was that we could be really, really proud of because we were able to use all of our expertise, and then all the expertise of dozens and dozens of really talented, great people that were consulting with us and working to help us make that. And then the hundreds and thousands of people that then were, physically making it happen, and getting all of that together and making it happen on a time frame was an accomplishment, something to be proud of.
Oh, absolutely. You 100% should be proud of that. And Isabella, is it the same answer for you, or something different that you would want to hang your hat on?
I think it's similar. I think I would add that the amount of time to design is very tight, and so I think it's always a challenge to kind of come up with ideas very quickly and figure out how to make them work very quickly. So I think that is something that I am proud of just having been able to do that at all.
Absolutely. And what's going to be next? Just something in a black box theater, something the complete opposite, pull it down as simple and stripped down as possible, or well, what's
We
the
do
challenge you
both
want to
come
take
from the
on?
theater world, so we could always retreat and go back.
Perfect. And Stephen, what about for you? What are you thinking? What do you want to do next?
Well, we'll all be hoping for a Beast Games too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But in the meantime, we're just doing what we do, which is making other reality shows and events, and keeping busy, keeping the lights on. And there's hope. We're hoping that the business is going to pick back up in the next year or so. And what we're really hoping is that Beast Games sent the signal out there to all the streamers and everybody else that they should be thinking about, making their own really big game show, and we can help people with those too.
Nice. Excellent. Well, congratulations on this, because I think it's a hell of a show. Definitely something to be proud of. I had a great time with it. And yeah, I'm hoping that there is going to be the season two. And I know that at the very least, my 9-year-old will be thoroughly disappointed if that's not something that's coming down the pike soon. So you got one that's definitely hugely invested in it. So congratulations, guys. And thank you both for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Take care. Thank you.
We used the bridges that we'd wired and blown. That time's over now. So over now. I can't say I'm sad to see it go. That's over now. So over now. So what you doing in a couple of years? On a Saturday. Round Halloween, I'll take your hand and I'll spit up fake blood. Should have known. So now here we go. It looks like the winter's never gonna be cold. It looks like the winter's never gonna be cold. I don't remember the cold time so well. We got so drunk that night, I watched you stomp the life out your phone. I felt special then. It was bad taste or dead alive. And I know you know I meant what I said. It looks like the winter's never gonna be cold. It looks like the winter's never gonna be cold. I don't remember the cold time so well. And most people never get what you've always been, always been, always been. And most people never get